and obviously we've got a lot of bills that have moved their way through the committee process. I'll try to do the best I can, answer any questions on that. I know you guys are aware that there's going to be some bills dropping involving our property tax bills today. They're going to have further conversations with Representative Kaufman as well as the Senate. We've been having some really productive conversations. We feel like with the Senate, as you're going to see, we're going to drop several bills. Some of them are things that we've considered in the past. For example, 3% capping or increases per parcel. Looking at some other ideas that other members have come up with that would allow for growth, but also would take some voter approval. Looking at unrealized gains, obviously a bill that the Senate we've worked on. They'll have several different phases within that we've had conversations in the Senate, so we're well aware of, and trying to keep up to speed on what they're pushing forward. Also looking at using some of our interest that's collected on our taxpayer relief fund to help buy down the 540 uniform levy as well. And so I come out with that today as one of the things. Now we were getting through the funnel, we're getting to that point in session. We're going to start having tax conversations and also start kind of the beginning phase of those budget conversations. But that's the one thing I just wanted to lead off with today, and then anything else you guys want to ask.
You said that uses the property tax relief fund a little bit.
Yeah. So what one of them will do, Aaron, would, and like I said, I know you guys are going to have further conversations the rest of the day. But one of them would use the interest that's collected off of the taxpayer relief fund that we have. It would use the interest that's collected to buy down that 540 levy that's on all parcels across the state of Iowa. Again, that's a new idea we've looked at. This conversation we're trying to do is not only provide certainty for Iowans, but if we can have some opportunities to provide relief, we feel like that is one potential opportunity.
In the Senate, there's a proposed constitutional amendment to repeal IWO so that a sales tax increase, the funding from that could be used to lower property taxes. Is that something that your caucus is open to?
We've had some conversations, obviously, with the Senate internally. Recognize now, I will say, I think that if we had an opportunity to find continued relief for property taxpayers, because we feel that's the number one thing we're hearing about right now. It sounds like with some of the feedback we're getting from the Senate bill that that probably isn't something that's going to move forward at this point in time. So I don't think it's something that's probably going to be high on our priority list. But I also don't know how it fully works its way through the Senate as well.
So at the end, with the end of the funnel week approaching here, maybe you could describe kind of overall the House Republicans' body of work so far and how it's meeting kind of the goals you set out and basically like give yourself a little rating. Like, how do you think you've done and what do you think is next?
Well, I don't do a full rating until, well, you're probably going to get a full rating from me at any point. However, that'll be more of an end of session thought process. But here's what I can say. We've continued to come in and try to address the issues that we think are extremely important. Now, some of those are going to be, like cost of living, for example, issues that we've been talking about. You're going to start seeing more of those conversations. We consider property tax to be kind of the driver in tax relief for Iowans. This year we're hoping to find some resolution for. But I think if higher ed committee, for example, was something that we talked about earlier in session, the bills that were proposed in that committee, nearly all of them, whether they had amendments or not, worked their way through the process. So we feel we accomplished some things. Some of the other things we talked about coming into session, like federal and other funds, also getting more autonomy for the state when it comes to this new administration. I think you've seen some bills move this week that would work towards that direction. And so I think at this point we're continuing on pace. We know we have a lot of work left to do to get those things done. And some of those will also be budget and tax related. So at this point, not every one of those is out there yet, but we know we still have more things to do.
There was a bill in the Senate that didn't make it through yesterday related to firefighters and cancer treatment and benefits. It clearly did make it through the Senate. Is it something that you're interested in bringing up?
Yeah, if I remember right, I think that bill did make its way through the process over here. We have, the bills that worked, whether they worked their way or not through the Senate, especially during final week, I struggle enough to keep up with the bills that we're doing, so not knowing what the Senate would do. We've looked at several policies trying to help support our first responders, whether it's through this, whether it's through some of our LoSAP programs. So typically we've had a pretty friendly ear to some of those conversations. At this point, I don't know what each individual bill's fate would be, but I know some of those that are out there we'll definitely discuss as a Congress.
Earlier in the session, when the pipeline bills dropped in the House, you mentioned that you just wanted to see some conversations in the Senate. Their bill did get a sub this week. How are you feeling about pipeline bills in the legislature?
I know that we have members actively engaging in those conversations, not just with individual members, but with some committee chairs and other things, which I think that is a positive sign. Obviously, we passed out some of those proposals, some new proposals, as well as some other things that we've even looked at in the past this session. from the pipelines perspective. We're going to continue to push forward. Again, I would be very hopeful that we can find some common ground on some of those issues from the Senate. If we're unable to achieve that, I still think our caucus want to move forward, but it would be nice to be able to do that with some agreements in place. Even if we don't agree to everything, it would just be nice to find a place to even start at.
Outside of property tax, we hope you can get that figured out this session. Where would you point where you brought relief to folks who are concerned about how much stuff costs?
Yeah, I think you're going to see over the next week. I don't have an exact date, Dave, at this point in time. You're going to see us filing some more bills through the tax policy committees, looking at child tax credit or child care tax credits, for example. We know that's a tremendous cost on Iowans. We're working on a bill right now that would expand access to who's qualifying for that. Right now it's capped out at $90,000 joint income. We're looking at a bill that may raise that, so I'm hopeful that can come out soon. We also have some other bills in the past we've looked at, what we consider like everyday use products for Iowans, looking at what the sales tax looks like for some of those. So we have some of those in the works. Hopefully they'll be, and then I would say maybe even in the next week, you'll start to see some of those types of policies roll out. Also another one that we feel is extremely important in the House that we think is something that we'd really like to be able to get through the House and through the Senate is looking at adoption tax credits. That would be another bill to help try to provide relief for some Iowans as well.
Democratic leadership says if SSA passes at 2%, 50% of school districts are going to have to be raising property taxes. The proposals that will be released today, do you think that's going to help curb any of those school districts who we've been hearing from? The property taxes are going to have to be risen to be able to meet a budget they're falling short.
Yeah, and I think keep in mind the number of schools increasing just because the 2% is not, all of those did not increase over 1 year. There's schools that have consistently been on the budget guarantee. So I think it's a little untruthful to say that all of a sudden now half of the schools will be. So I think just to be intellectually honest with ourselves, while that number, we would like to see that number lower, it hasn't all just happened this session. We do recognize that as an issue, and it gets back to what I've talked about in these conversations is some of that just is property values and enrollment across the state impacts some of that. If we don't have growth in other parts of the state, you're going to continue to face challenges on property taxes. You can put all the money you want into SSA if you have declining enrollment because of not having enough growth in rural Iowa in our economy, you're going to continue to face those struggles. So we're trying to take it as a 30,000-foot view approach to some of those. And I think there's going to be more bills to see us making sure we're making investments in the state, in our economy, in our job growth, not just in certain areas of the state, but all parts of the state.
Representative Phil Thompson is over in the Senate subcommittee this week about wanting the salary. There's also a nearly double lobby for the salary. Do you think the House would do that?
So obviously last year we passed a bill towards the end of session, and we had a conversation in the caucus. We were unsure at that point in time whether the Senate would even consider that bill, but the House Republican Caucus last year felt strongly enough about that issue, they still wanted to move forward. I'm hopeful to see some activity. I know there's been some action in the Senate on the bill that they're proposing. If they can get us a bill, we'll definitely take a look at that. Whether that's exactly what it would end up looking like, I don't know. But I think the House has been very clear by taking the vote we did last year to send them a bill that we have interest in looking at that. And I think former Representative Thompson is a perfect example of a very good legislator who, starting a new family, being a young person, trying to start that family, and this was a big commitment for him to be able to make. And quite frankly, we haven't raised our pay long before. I've been here almost 20 years, and we haven't even really considered it up until last session. And so whatever we do, we need to be smart about how we do it. But if Iowans want to have good representatives here that can not just be people that are wealthy or just retirees, I think we need to be very careful about how we approach this, that we do want to encourage people to run in the legislature that represent everyday Iowans in a very broad way. Look at farmers, for example. Since I was elected to where we are right now, the number of legislators in this body have probably cut well over in half. We just need to continue to have folks from all across the state that have the ability to do this job.
Does that argument get harder to make in the Doge environment that we're in, where every tax dollar is being scrutinized?
Well, I would say that I think the answer is probably yes, Stephen, to be honest with you, but it isn't something that we've done for well over 20 years. What I would like to see ultimately in the system is if we do make an increase, it needs to be, have kind of some sort of a natural growth process in it, whether it's a COLA or whatever you want to call it. So that way the legislature doesn't have to revisit this concept, because I don't think that's healthy either. But when you're getting to the point where we have well-qualified legislators and people that want to run for office and just say, I can't make this level of sacrifice. We know public service is a sacrifice, but when you have them not being able to do this job anymore, I think it's incumbent on us. And keep in mind, this was a bipartisan bill last year, and I would expect to see that continue because I think both parties are recognizing the impacts it has on people doing this job.
There's one bill signed into law thus far. We didn't get a chance to talk to you last week. What is your message to transgender Iowans who feel that their state government is hostile towards them?
Well, I think that if you look at the election last session, or this last election this fall, every campaign ad, whether it was in the most purple, blue, red districts that we made significant investments on, we said we were going to do whatever we could to protect girls' sports. We were going to protect our bathroom bills that we had passed. And as we just saw 2 weeks ago, a suit filed against our 2023 bathroom bill showed that those things were in jeopardy as long as that continued to be in the Civil Rights Code. I think we reached a point as a caucus where we didn't feel that both of those could exist, as well as protecting those things that we campaigned on for Iowans, and obviously they rewarded us with a significant majority. So for us, it was about making sure that we were following through with the things that we would protect, and we just reached the point where we felt that they could no longer coexist.
Some of the discussion during the debate last week had to do with things like discrimination in credit practices in housing. How did those things relate to what you just laid out as far as
Well,
sports?
I don't think that they, like over half the states don't even have this protection in law, and I think Steve, or Representative Holt, even brought up some of those are very large states. They're not just a 3 million population state like Iowa. We feel that the administration under the Biden administration would have addressed this if this was a rampant problem. I think that's something that is looked at that isn't necessarily what the impacts are actually going to be, what's actually happening in everyday practice in the real world. And so from our perspective, if those other states are being able to make it work, we're not sure why Iowa can. And if it's jeopardizing the girls' sports law, the bathroom laws that we've passed, we felt that was the right decision to make. And this will be, I'll probably do one more, just so everyone is aware, we are not going to be passing a ban on mRNA vaccines in the House. I'm not sure why that narrative is out there. We didn't have a bill to ban those vaccines. I just want to make sure Iowans are aware that we're hearing a lot from them. That is not a House bill. That is not a bill that we're passing within the House. So I just wanted to clarify that for everybody.
Can I clarify on that? There is a House bill in judiciary.
There is a House bill that would look at the immunity protections for the drug manufacturers, but the bill that we're receiving all of the feedback on from Iowans would say it would be a ban. I think that bill, even in the Senate, was amended to do that. I just want to make sure that it's being clarified. What we're looking at would be, which is two separate conversations. Right. It's still a real conversation to have, and what are the impacts, but I just want to be clear that our bill does not ban that. It would look at the protections that are in place for drug manufacturers. It's not saying that it would be a ban of those products.
But you are considering the House bill.
I think at this point in time, the bill, I don't know if it's passed out in committee, I can't remember or not, but if it would, we would look at it. But again, I think we need to be very clear in our coverage of what those are two different conversations than what you saw in the Senate. Even that bill didn't advance.
Some physicians say the House bill is worse because it would have the impact of making all vaccines unavailable in Iowa, not just mRNA vaccines.
The bill would not ban anyone from being able to use those. We have immunity and protections that are in place for those drug manufacturers. That's what this conversation is about. And again, this is not saying that something that's even a fast-track priority. I just want to make sure that we're clarifying that there won't be a bill that says you cannot do this in the state of Iowa. All right, thanks everybody.